I'll get to the price compass in just a minute, but first I want to talk about strategic design a little bit. Strategic design is not just a single product. It's an entire suite of products that build on themselves and each other to provide the best possible outcomes for solopreneurs, for small businesses, and startups. To keep an eye on what strategic design is building, I put together, using Tana, a production queue. Let me show you. So this is what the website looks like, and I'm showing on this page what's currently being built, what's in an alpha testing stage, and beta testing, which means release is imminent. For instance, Delivered Apollo. This is the pricing compass that I will be talking about in 1 minute. Now, let me actually update the status off screen to launched. So once I refresh this page, it should no longer be in beta testing. Yep, only effortless time, which is coming soon. If you want to know more, if you want to participate in testing, and if you want to have big discounts or even free things, join Strategic Labs, and you'll get access to a community where you are able to test things, give feedback, and have products really built for you. So that's that. Let's dive into the price compass now. Okay, I'm going to cover things in a few broad strokes. First, I'm going to explain how to operate this thing. Just enough so that you understand what does what kind of numbers to enter, and what the results that are spit out are telling you. But there's a lot more going on beneath the surface. So after I go through that first pass, I'll go through it again and really dive into all the details. So if you want, you can just stop watching after a few minutes, do it, but then you might have questions of what exactly is going on here? Why did Nick make all these different decisions here? Then you can come back to the video later and really understand why I built it the way that I did. And also learn some new tricks that you can pull. So first step is there's kind of 3 stages. You fill in information about your competition or the broader market, not necessarily competitors, but products that people think of in the same vein as what your product is going to be. Next, you fill in data points for your product, and then there's some final results. Okay, so start with the competition, and I've got little tooltips here all over the place. I recommend you insert at least 4 different products here. I have space for a lot more than that, but at a minimum, do 4 products. Let's fill out a 5th one as we go through here. So that's the product name. Pretty straightforward so far. This real full price. 2 things to that. One is, it's not the discounted price if there's a weird sales happening at, any one time. And it's not the price that if they do certain things, they get this amount. It's whatever the sticker price that people will actually pay typically for these other products in the market, okay? And if it's a subscription product, use the yearly or the annual price, not the monthly price. Let's say for this product E, it's significantly cheaper than these other options, $65. Now this part is probably the most complex piece of data that you need to understand and enter, the utility index. Okay, so all 3 of these, first of all, they're numbers between 1 and 5. Do not enter 0 for any of these, ever. Between 1 and 5. The utility index. Okay, so when you think of the theory of a product and the different things that might impact how much someone would want to pay for a product or how likely they would be to purchase it, one of them is what kind of utility is it being used for, or is it likely to be used for? What do I mean by that? Consider a spectrum. At one end of this spectrum or continuum, you've got making money. So you can use that product to make money. In the middle, there's saving money or saving time. And then way at the other end, There's something else, other things like it's just fun to use. You're connecting with friends. You are just signing up for an experience or to be entertained, anything. But you're not saving or making money or time, something else. You can think of each of those as 5, a value of 5 for making money, 3 for saving money or time, and 1 for something else. It's a lot more difficult to convince someone to spend a lot of money on something that is purely just for the enjoyment of that thing than it is to tell someone, hey, you're going to make a bunch of money if you use this. You can think of this scale as how easy, all else being equal, how easy is it to convince someone to spend a lot of money on it? Now, as an example of this thing that you can use to make money, think of eBay, okay? The typical user, even if they start out as someone who's just buying a product, the typical user could also be a seller. And so that's why I would put eBay as a 5. You could argue maybe it's kind of a 4 because not everyone is going to be a seller, but everyone could be a seller. And it's reasonable to expect anyone to become a seller. When it comes to that saving time or saving money, any productivity app that legitimately could save people time or money in any way, that would be a 3 then. The 2 and the 4, when would you apply that? So that 4 would be between saving time, saving money, and between that and making money. So it could either be like people could make money, but not always, or it's kind of a weak argument for saying they could make money with that product. So instead of a 5, it's really a 4. Or maybe people save a lot of money and they could also use it to make money, but it's not a typical experience that people are using that product to make money. So you might nudge that into a 4 then. You can also do something similar at the other end of the spectrum. So something is really super enjoyable that maybe it kind of creeps into actually saving time or saving money because they don't need to buy other products. Like, you got to be careful because you can kind of make an argument for anything to fit anywhere at some point, but you could see something sneaking in from 1 to 2 in that regard. All right, let's go back to the sheet now. So this utility index, in these examples, I have a couple 3s and a couple 4s. So most of them are in that saving time, saving money space. A couple of them are bleeding into maybe kind of making money with the product, you know? Let's say this product E, it's another one where it's like, it's possible to make money. Most people aren't, but it's enough of a likelihood that I'm putting it as a 4, you know? The solution quality, what do I mean by that? I think this is probably the most straightforward one. How high quality is the solution? Both in how well it solves the problem, but also the presentation. Is it using the latest tech? Is it a pleasant user experience? Everything considered. How high quality is the solution? All right. For this last product, let's say it's also like almost a 5. The problem salience. What that means is whatever problem this product is solving, how painful is it? How much do people notice that it's a problem? How much does it intrude on their daily lives? This product D has a 5 out of 5. So whatever problem they're solving, it's a very noticeably painful problem. Product C, however, is almost at the other end of the spectrum. It's not the most insignificant, but it's definitely not very salient. Okay, it's not super painful, or people are not super aware of that pain point. So for this product E, let's say it's actually 1. It's the least salient possible. So really high quality solution, but it's not super painful for people. Now I'm gonna skip over these numbers for now because technically speaking, you don't need to understand them to move on to the next phase, which we will do now. First, let's start with these 3 numbers. They're the same as what you filled in for all of these competing products, but it's for your product. This is a new one, the potential market. Okay, Now to think of this number, imagine whatever your product is, what are the total possible number of people that would be interested in it if you gave it away or nearly gave it away for free, okay? Maybe it's a number that's really huge, like 500,000. Like maybe you're making a product that is part of another product ecosystem. That entire ecosystem, there's 500,000 people. And you think that anyone in that ecosystem would also be interested in your product. Okay, cool. Then again, maybe you think only like 1% of those people would actually be interested. So instead of 500,000, it's only 5,000. Whatever you think is reasonable. Now your product sheet is done. Now we move on to results. We've got a bunch of numbers up here, then a chart. The first thing I'm going to do is this chart isn't strictly necessary for you to understand what's happening, but it's really nice to have a visual. And when it's all scrunched like this on the left side, that doesn't help very much as a visual. So what you can do is expose these columns, and you see where everything starts to go into zero here? You can actually just delete those rows. And if I hide these columns again, now that's a much nicer looking graph, okay? By the way, whenever you are doing this, I recommend copying the entire workbook and making a new experience for each product that you research. So whenever you do make changes like that, it won't impact future things. If you do decide that you want to add more columns, you can do that at any time by just selecting the last column or any number of these and continuing down, just clicking and dragging, and that'll add those back. But I don't want that now, so let's just keep it like that. So for now, we're going to ignore the chart and just focus on these numbers up here. What do they mean? At the highest level possible, these numbers here on the right side, these are the numbers that you want to look at and consider if you're trying to maximize your profit margin potential within reason. You know, you don't want to only be selling to one or two people, of course, but within a certain critical mass window, these are going to maximize your profit margins. If you want to just maximize your revenue, which if you're doing digital products, revenue is roughly a correlation with profit, then you're going to be looking at these other two numbers, okay? Side note, these numbers don't always go perfectly in line like this. Sometimes, especially these two numbers will switch, but more or less, you still get this kind of continuum. If you want to really focus on growth, in other words, you're valuing the quantity of people who are getting your product much more than in these other cases. You just want to get customers, but not lose money, you know? You want to have a healthy revenue stream still. Then this is the number you're looking at for that as inspiration. Now that we've gone through all of that, I'm going to kind of work backwards and uncover all of the philosophy and not really go into the math so much, but really explain what the logic is going on behind all of these numbers and this chart and the data that you're entering. So let's start with these numbers up here. What do they mean? This profit spike means if you're looking at this chart and each point that you lower the price, when does the profit really start turning up, you know? In this example, that starts happening at about 174. That's when the inflection really takes off. The buyer inflection tends to be around the same area, but that is when, if you follow the curve in the same way, the number of buyers hits an inflection point. So in this example, 159. That's when, if you take one step over another, zoom, the number of buyers increases the most compared to any other step that you take. This competitive price anchor, that has nothing to do with the chart per se. That takes these other values and arrives at a calculation. Basically, what this number represents is if you just take a mathematical averages perspective, of what type of quality and utility and everything that your competitors or whatever products in the market, what they're like. You take the values that you input, and then you do a kind of a multiplication. And this is what the market hypothetically says your product should cost if everything is standard. Optimal revenue. This one looks at all of these data points, and it looks for which one of these points maximizes revenue. 131 in this case, right here. And that tends to be the point in the curve where that happens, roughly around here every time. And then finally, revenue drop off. That's where you enter the point of diminishing returns, no turning back. Like, you have no reason to go much lower than that in price, because yes, you're still technically getting more customers, but not many more, and you're losing revenue quickly. So that's right around here. Let's go into the chart a bit. Why does it look like this? Where did it come from? Why? So the inspiration for this came from epidemiology and the study of epidemics. The way that those charts work, it looks just like this, only in the opposite direction. You tend to have a population. So let's say this is number of people in a population, 5,000. And then this axis here is time. So each of these is a day or a week or whatever. And so what you get in an epidemic, it looks like that. So it starts out, it's just trying to get traction. It finds a guy. Okay, now there's like 2 other people who are infected. Okay, now we got 4 people. It's slow moving at first, but then it reaches a point where suddenly there's enough people that are infected that can affect other people around them. There's kind of a critical mass moment that happens right around here, and it zooms up. But then once you've already infected like 4,900 out of 5,000 people, it's actually kind of hard to find someone who isn't infected already. And so it slows down. It peters out until finally, eventually, everyone's gotten infected. So the theory is that there's a certain number of people who would theoretically be interested in your product. Some products people aren't going to be interested in, even if they're free. But if you were able to put your product in front of every person in the world and it was free, with the exception of like maybe entering their email or whatever, but it's free, and you put it in front of them with the appropriate marketing terminology and everything, okay, out of everyone in the world then, who would be interested in your product in that case? And that's what this number would be, which I put as 5,000 in this example, okay? So if it's free, then basically 5,000 people should be willing to be your customers. And so what you get is, way over here at like 1,000, no one is interested. 500, 400, 350, still no one. At about like 320, oh, there's one guy. One guy would want to buy your product at that price. And then at like 275, you got 2 people. Then you get 3, 9, 12. Suddenly, at some point, there's a mass of people who are like, okay, I'll buy it at that price, sure. But then you reach the same issue, in the inverse direction, where it's like, I've reached 4,500 or 4,800 people out of all the possible people. If I lower it down another $10, I'm getting like 2 more people than before, So yeah, that is really what's happening in this chart. Anything natural does not behave linearly. Not really. So that's why the optimal revenue is not at the midpoint, actually. It's a little above the midpoint because the number of customers is growing faster than you can lower the price until it reaches kind of an equilibrium over here and then slows down. What is this line here intersecting? This, again, is really mostly for visualization, but this is an exponential curve. And wherever this crosses, I would say is really the center of gravity for your S-curve. A few more things to note about this graph before we move on. The first thing is that this chart is kind of optimistic in nature. It has an optimistic bias. What do I mean by that, and why is that? What I mean by that is it assumes that there are this many people interested in the product and that you would have the right marketing and promotions for people, and you would be able to reach all of those people. We make that assumptions to make it a clean exercise. We're not trying to be overly optimistic. The ratios should still more or less line up and not change a whole lot, but there's a little bit of extra optimism in this chart. Why is that important? Well, because if you're trying to get this optimal revenue at 131, then maybe it's actually 125 or 120. That could be possible. Even if that weren't the case, I would recommend operating a little underneath of whatever target price you're working towards. Let's go with that 131 again. Why do I recommend that? Because let's say you're off one way or another, who knows? It's better to be a little bit too far on the left here than on the right of that curve. Because if you're going on the left, you're lowering the price, but at least you're gaining more customers, which gives you more data points. It gives you more opportunities to sell in the future. If you're going to get things wrong, get it wrong in that direction. If you get it wrong in the opposite direction, sure, the price is going up, so you're making more money per customer, but you're also getting fewer customers, fewer data points, fewer opportunities to upsell or cross-sell later. And if you make a mistake going in the right direction, those mistakes go further in that direction. You become more wrong with each step in the price than if you are wrong in that direction on the price. Let's go back to potential market. It doesn't make a huge change in the numbers. So 131 is optimal revenue with 5,000. Let's go back to 500,000. What is it then? Still 131, and it looks very similar in here. But what really changes things if you go down to, say, like 500, as you get really small numbers, then that changes things. And this could be very important if you are operating an Etsy store that has a very niche market, for instance. It's going to be a lot more price sensitive than if you're operating in a market where you hypothetically have 60 million possible customers, you know? Okay, so that's one thing to note. The other thing is these numbers, the demand factor and the cost of demand. Okay, this is super interesting stuff. With each of these values, higher is better. So the highest possible value you can give a product would be 555. It's a very salient problem, very high quality solution, and it's something that people can almost certainly make money using. The lowest possible would be 111. There are very few products, either all ones or all fives, especially products that you've heard of, that you know of. They're probably not going to be all ones, you know? What is the demand factor? The demand factor takes in all three of these values, and then it does a transformation, a calculation. And this demand factor means the higher the number, the more demand for that product based on these values. The cost of demand, that's basically dollars per demand point. Here, higher is worse. It's expensive. Like this product B, it only has a demand factor of 3.5. Not super high, but it costs 130 bucks, about the same as these others. With a lower demand factor, that means the demand costs more than with these other products. So these are color-coded automatically based on the values compared to the other values on the sheet. And cool colors are better than hot colors. So if you have two cool colors, blue and green, for instance, that is very powerful. That means product D is probably very hard to compete with. In fact, you might wonder how they're able to charge so little. Maybe they're going to be increasing their price soon. Which, by the way, leads me to another way that you can use this price compass. You may not even have your own product. Maybe you just want to get a sense for what other people are doing in a space. Maybe you just want to do some competitive research. Well, this can give you some insights into what everyone else is doing in a space and what their relative strengths and weaknesses are. Whoever makes product D, it's going to be really hard to compete with them because not only are they providing a lot of value, this is another way to think of it, value for customers. So high value and low cost per value. Now it kind of makes sense why product E has this super low price and they're going at the opposite kind of problem salience. It looks like they're just trying to differentiate themselves from the pack. All right, let's go back to your product real quick. It's pretty simple here. This is your demand factor. There's no cost of demand because the primary purpose is to discover what kind of pricing strategy you want to pursue. So that doesn't exist here, although you could do that calculation really easily. Just price divided by demand factor. Boom. I think the only other thing that I want to mention is your pricing strategy. So I already covered that these two numbers are probably going to be, let's bump this back up. Let's do 1 million. Boom. So at this end of the pricing spectrum, that's where you're trying to maximize within reason, within this band of critical mass, you're trying to maximize your profit margin. That's basically what these numbers represent. And then these, you're trying to optimize for revenue or for profit, okay? So that's over here. And then this is for growth. So way up here. All right. Now there's two different ways that you could approach that. Maybe it's on a product by product basis. Maybe for each individual product, you start off with a price, something like that for early customers, or you want to get traction, whatever. But then you increase over time and you arrive at eventually 158 or 174 or whatever as the full price. You could also have a strategy for your company overall that for your first 6 quarters of existence, you're going to be in hardcore growth mode, growth and revenue, you know? And that's where you're going to keep all of your prices in this area. But maybe after those 6 quarters, you pivot to maybe not all the way over there, but something more balanced, okay? I think I want to end by reminding you that the purpose of this is not to tell you what prices to use. It's to help you on the journey of discovering what logical strategies would entail and what that would mean for your pricing points. In other words, it gets you to start a conversation with yourself or with other people on your team about what kind of numbers you should be charging and what kind of strategy you should have for your product or products. Yeah, okay, so the link will be down below for both the price compass and that production queue. Yeah, I think that's everything. So now you know, and knowing is half the battle.